The tension in the Senate hearing room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Senator Tommy Tuberville sat behind the mahogany desk, his Alabama drawl ready to deliver what he thought would be a knockout punch. Across from him, Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas waited calmly, her hands folded, eyes steady. What happened in the next 30 seconds would leave Tuberville speechless and change everything anyone thought they knew about military expertise in Congress. Tuberville had just finished questioning the defense budget allocations, his voice carrying that familiar tone of someone who believed his football coaching background gave him automatic authority on military strategy. "Now, I've got some real concerns about these defense spending proposals," he began, leaning forward with a smirk. "And I'm wondering if some folks in this room actually understand what our military needs." His eyes locked on Crockett. The room held its breath. "Representative Crockett," Tuberville continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "with all due respect, what exactly qualifies you to speak on military matters? I mean, what's your experience with our armed forces?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Camera phones discreetly rose around the gallery. Congressional staff members looked up from their notes. This was about to become a moment. Before we dive into what happened next, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of these incredible political showdowns. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. To understand the magnitude of what was about to happen, you need to know exactly who these two people are and why this confrontation mattered so much. Tommy Tuberville, the 69-year-old senator from Alabama, had built his reputation on two things: coaching college football for 4 decades and his unwavering support for military spending. After coaching teams like Auburn and Texas Tech, Tuberville rode into the Senate in 2020 on a wave of conservative support, positioning himself as the voice of traditional American values. His supporters loved his no-nonsense approach and his frequent references to his coaching days when discussing leadership and strategy. But Tuberville had a pattern. Time and again, he'd use his platform to question whether younger politicians, especially women and people of color, had the experience to weigh in on serious matters. He'd done it with climate policy, economic issues, and now military affairs. His base ate it up every time, viewing it as a seasoned veteran putting young upstarts in their place. On the other side sat Jasmine Crockett, the 43-year-old representative from Texas, who had quickly become one of the most respected voices on defense issues since arriving in Congress. A former civil rights attorney with a sharp legal mind, Crockett had earned a reputation for her thorough preparation and ability to dismantle weak arguments with surgical precision. Her constituents in Dallas knew her as someone who never backed down from a fight, especially when defending the interests of military families. But what made this moment so significant wasn't just about these two individuals. This was about a larger pattern playing out across American politics. Older white male politicians consistently questioning the qualifications of younger women of color, particularly on issues traditionally seen as male domains like military policy. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The defense budget under discussion involved billions of dollars in spending that would directly impact military families, veterans' benefits, and national security. Tuberville's question wasn't just personal, it was an attempt to undermine Crockett's credibility on one of the most important issues facing the country. What Tuberville didn't know was that he had just walked into a trap of his own making. Crockett had been waiting for this moment, not because she wanted confrontation, but because she knew the truth about military service would eventually need to come out. And when it did, it would reshape how people viewed expertise and authority in the halls of Congress. The hearing room buzzed with anticipation. Staff members on both sides of the aisle leaned forward. C-SPAN cameras captured every angle. Social media managers prepared their phones. Everyone sensed that something significant was about to happen. Tuberville wasn't done with his opening salvo. He had tasted what he thought was blood in the water. And like many politicians who mistake silence for weakness, he decided to press his advantage. "You see, folks," Tuberville continued, turning slightly toward the gallery as if performing for an audience, "this is exactly what I'm talking about. We've got people making decisions about our brave men and women in uniform, and I'm not sure they understand what military life is really about." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Several Democratic members of the committee shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Republican side nodded approvingly. This was classic Tuberville, questioning credentials while positioning himself as the adult in the room. Crockett remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. Years of courtroom experience had taught her the value of patience, of letting opponents overplay their hands before striking back. Now, I spent 40 years coaching young men, Tuberville pressed on, his Alabama accent thickening with confidence. I know what discipline looks like. I know what sacrifice means. I've prepared thousands of young people for the battles they'd face in life. That's real leadership experience. He paused for effect, clearly enjoying what he perceived as his dominance of the moment. But I'm curious, Representative Crockett. What battles have you fought? What uniform have you worn? What military families have you counseled? The questions came rapid fire, each one designed to highlight what Tuberville assumed was Crockett's lack of military connection. Around the room, Republicans smirked. They'd seen this playbook before. Establish your credentials, question your opponents, watch them fumble for an adequate response. But something interesting was happening. Instead of looking flustered or defensive, Crockett's expression had shifted. The slight tightening around her eyes suggested not embarrassment or anger, but something else entirely. Recognition. As if she'd been waiting for exactly these questions. Senator Tuberville, she said finally, her voice calm and measured. I appreciate your questions about military experience and qualifications. The room leaned in. Here it comes, they thought. The fumbling explanation, the pivot to other topics, the admission that she didn't have the background to speak authoritatively. On defense issues, you're absolutely right. That understanding military service and sacrifice is crucial for anyone making decisions that affect our armed forces, Crockett continued. It's why I take these responsibilities so seriously. Tuberville nodded, thinking he was getting the concession he wanted. But then Crockett did something unexpected. She reached into her folder and pulled out a stack of documents. You asked about my experience with military families, she said, holding up the papers. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's important for everyone in this room to understand exactly what qualifies someone to speak on these matters. The shift in the room was palpable. Staff members who had been preparing to witness an embarrassing moment suddenly focused intently on the documents in Crockett's hands. The smirks on Republican faces began to fade, replaced by uncertainty. You see, Senator, Crockett continued, I've been wondering when someone would finally ask me about my family's military service. It's something I don't talk about often, not because I'm not proud of it, but because I believe service should speak for itself, not be used as a political prop. Tuberville's confidence wavered for the first time. Something in Crockett's tone had changed. The defensive posture he'd expected was nowhere to be found. Instead, she sounded like a prosecutor who had just been handed the perfect piece of evidence. But since you've raised the question of qualifications and military understanding, Crockett said, setting the documents on the table in front of her, I think it's time to set the record straight. The room held its breath. Even the usually chattering gallery fell silent. Camera phones around the room shifted focus from Tuberville to Crockett. Whatever was in those documents was about to change everything. Tuberville realized he might have miscalculated. The confident politician who had dominated the early moments of this exchange now looked like a coach whose game plan was falling apart. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but Crockett was already speaking. My grandfather served in World War II, she began, her voice carrying new authority. My father served 2 tours in Vietnam. My brother served in Iraq. My cousin served in Afghanistan. With each revelation, the documents in her hands seemed to carry more weight. Tuberville's face began to flush. Around the room, people pulled out their phones, sensing that something significant was happening. But that's just the beginning of my family's service to this country, Crockett continued. And for the first time since the exchange began, she smiled. Not a political smile, but the smile of someone who knew they held all the cards. The moment that would be replayed millions of times across social media was about to unfold. Crockett lifted the first document from her stack, holding it up for the room to see. This, she said, is my grandfather's Bronze Star citation from the Battle of the Bulge. From the Battle of the Bulge. The room went dead silent. A Bronze Star. one of the military's highest honors for valor in combat. Tuberville's eyes widened as the magnitude of his mistake began to dawn on him. Technical Sergeant James Crockett distinguished himself by heroic achievement in connection with military operations against an armed enemy, she read from the citation. During the German counteroffensive in December 1944, Sergeant Crockett repeatedly exposed himself to enemy fire to evacuate wounded soldiers from the battlefield. The words hung in the air like a rebuke. Every person in that room understood the significance of what they were hearing. This wasn't just military service. This was decorated combat heroism. But Crockett wasn't finished. My father, Staff Sergeant Robert Crockett, earned the Silver Star in Vietnam, she continued, lifting another document. He saved his entire platoon when they were ambushed near Da Nang in 1968. The Silver Star, the third highest military decoration for valor in combat. Tuberville's face had gone from flushed to pale. Around the room, jaws literally dropped. Republican committee members who had been nodding along with Tuberville's attack suddenly found their notepads very interesting. My brother, Sergeant First Class Marcus Crockett, served with the 82nd Airborne in Iraq. Purple Heart recipient, another document. Another decoration, another nail in Tuberville's coffin. And my cousin, Captain Sarah Crockett, served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic. Bronze Star with Valor device. The stack of documents seemed endless. With each revelation, Tuberville sank deeper into his chair. What had started as his attempt to embarrass a young congresswoman had turned into a showcase of one of the most distinguished military families in recent American history. So to answer your question, Senator, Crockett said, setting the documents down and looking directly at Tuberville. My experience with military families comes from being part of one. My understanding of sacrifice comes from watching my family members deploy again and again, never knowing if they'd come home. The silence in the room was deafening. Camera phones captured Tuberville's stunned expression. Staff members frantically took notes. The C-SPAN cameras caught every second of what was clearly a historic moment. My knowledge of military strategy, Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength, comes from countless dinner-table conversations with decorated combat veterans who lived these experiences, not just coached from the sidelines. The coached from the sidelines line hit like a thunderbolt. It was a direct shot at Tuberville's football background, delivered with surgical precision. Around the room, people tried to stifle gasps, but the most devastating moment was yet to come. And Senator, Crockett said, pulling out one final document, since you question my qualifications to speak on military matters, I think you should know. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee not despite my background, but because of it. This is my security clearance. She held up an official document that clearly showed her top-secret security clearance, a level of clearance that indicated she had access to some of the most sensitive military intelligence in the country. I review classified military operations. I'm briefed on threats to national security. I help determine funding for programs that protect our troops in combat zones around the world. Her voice was steady, professional, but carried an edge that left no doubt about her authority on these matters. Tuberville opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The confident politician who had started this exchange had been completely dismantled by facts he never saw coming. So when you ask what qualifies me to speak on military matters, Crockett concluded, the answer is simple. A family legacy of service, sacrifice, and dedication to protecting this country that spans 4 generations and multiple combat zones. The room erupted, not in partisan applause, but in the kind of spontaneous reaction that happens when people witness something genuinely remarkable. Even some Republican staff members found themselves nodding in acknowledgement of what they'd just heard. Tuberville sat stunned, his political theater completely backfired. The attack that was supposed to embarrass Crockett had instead revealed her to have one of the most impressive military family legacies in Congress. Any other questions about my qualifications, Senator? Crockett asked, her tone polite but unmistakably triumphant. Tuberville shook his head, unable to form words. The man who had questioned her military knowledge had just been silenced by the very credentials he claimed she didn't possess, the immediate aftermath in the hearing. Room was unlike anything most congressional veterans had ever witnessed. As the committee took a brief recess, the buzz of conversation filled the air. Staff members huddled around their phones, already seeing the first clips hitting social media. Republican aides avoided eye contact with their Democratic counterparts, who were struggling to contain their amazement at what had just unfolded. Tuberville himself sat alone at his position on the committee, staring at his notes. The confident senator who had entered the hearing ready to make political points had been completely blindsided by revelations he never saw coming. His staff approached cautiously, whispering urgent advice about damage control. But the damage was already done and spreading across the internet at light speed. Within minutes of the exchange ending, Tuberville-owned began trending on social media platform X, formerly Twitter. The first clips appeared less than 60 seconds after Crockett finished speaking, posted by congressional reporters who recognized they had just witnessed political history. Watch. Reppers Jasmine Crockett destroys Senator. Tuberville, with her family's military service record, read one viral post that would eventually receive over 2 million views. The video spread like wildfire across all platforms. TikTok users created compilation videos showing Tuberville's confident opening contrasted with his stunned silence at the end. Instagram stories featured screenshots of the military decorations Crockett had displayed. YouTube channels dedicated to political content began preparing full breakdowns of the exchange. The speed of the viral spread was unprecedented, even by modern social media standards. Political communication experts noted that the exchange had all the elements of perfect viral content: a clear underdog story, dramatic reversal, visual proof, and authentic emotion. Within 6 hours, the video had been shared more than 500,000 times across all platforms. This is what viral political content looks like in 2025, observed one digital strategy expert. It's not manufactured outrage or scripted zingers. It's authentic moments where substance meets preparation and creates genuine drama. The hashtag #TouchYourMilitaryFamily began trending alongside Tuberville-owned, as military families across the country shared their own service stories inspired by Crockett's revelation. The organic nature of this response surprised even experienced social media analysts, who noted that political content rarely generates such authentic grassroots engagement. But the story was bigger than just social media buzz. Major news networks picked up the story within hours, with military affairs correspondents providing context about the significance of the decorations Crockett's family had earned. Bronze Star from the Battle of the Bulge represents the highest level of combat heroism, explained one military historian on a cable news program. For a family to have multiple members receive high-level combat decorations across multiple conflicts is extraordinarily rare. The political implications were immediate and far-reaching. Democratic strategists recognized they had stumbled upon the perfect counter-narrative to Republican attacks on young, diverse politicians' qualifications. Here was undeniable proof that assumptions about background and expertise could be not just wrong, but spectacularly wrong. This is what happens when politicians make assumptions based on appearance rather than substance, tweeted one prominent Democratic strategist. Jasmine Crockett just showed why homework matters in politics. The Democratic National Committee immediately began incorporating the exchange into their broader messaging strategy. Within 48 hours, party strategists were using Crockett's moment as a template for how to respond to credential challenges. The exchange became a masterclass in turning defensive moments into offensive opportunities. Campaign consultants across the country began advising their clients to prepare similar documentation about their backgrounds and qualifications. The Crockett strategy, allowing opponents to commit to their attacks before revealing devastating counter-evidence, became a widely studied political technique. Every politician should have their version of Jasmine Crockett's folder, advised one experienced campaign manager. Know your credentials, document them thoroughly, and be ready to deploy them when someone tries to diminish your expertise. The exchange also had significant implications for how political opposition research is conducted. Republican strategists privately acknowledged that their failure to uncover Crockett's family military background represented a major intelligence failure that could have been avoided with more thorough preparation. This is why you do comprehensive background research on your opponents, admitted one Republican operative. Assuming you know someone's qualifications based on demographics is political malpractice in 2025. Conservative commentators found themselves in an impossible position. How do you defend a politician who attacked a congresswoman whose family's military service far exceeded that of most members of Congress? Some tried to pivot, arguing that family service doesn't automatically confer expertise, but the argument fell flat against the visual impact of those military decorations. The argument that family service doesn't equal personal expertise particularly struggled against Crockett's revelation of her top-secret security clearance. Critics could dismiss inherited military knowledge, but they couldn't dismiss her current access to classified military intelligence and her active role in reviewing sensitive operations. Tuberville walked into a buzzsaw of his own making, admitted one conservative pundit. You can't question someone's military credentials when their family has 4 generations of combat veterans and she personally has security clearance to review classified military operations. Some conservative voices attempted to reframe the exchange as being about communication style rather than substance, arguing that Tuberville's questions were legitimate, even if poorly executed. These efforts gained little traction as the video clearly showed both his condescending tone and his stunned reaction to Crockett's revelations. The story resonated particularly strongly with military families across the country, who saw in Crockett's revelation a recognition of the sacrifices that often go unrecognized in political discourse. Veterans groups began sharing the video with messages about the importance of understanding military service before making assumptions about qualifications. My grandfather earned a Bronze Star in Korea, and seeing Rep. Crockett honor her family's service while making her point was powerful, wrote one Gold Star family member on social media. Politicians need to understand that military families come in all colors and backgrounds. The reaction from military families wasn't just supportive, it was deeply personal. Many service members and veterans expressed frustration that it took a political confrontation to highlight the diversity of military service. Comment sections filled with stories from military families who had felt invisible in political discourse until Crockett's moment brought their experiences into the spotlight. But perhaps the most significant impact was on Crockett herself. Overnight, she had gone from being a respected but relatively unknown committee member to a national figure. Interview requests poured in from major networks. Speaking invitations arrived from veterans organizations, military academies, and defense contractors. More importantly, her colleagues on both sides of the aisle began viewing her differently. The quiet preparation and military family background that she had rarely discussed publicly now commanded respect in ways that changed committee dynamics immediately. After that exchange, nobody questions Jasmine's expertise on defense issues, confided one Republican committee member privately. She clearly knows what she's talking about, and her family's service speaks for itself. The long-term political ramifications extended far beyond this single exchange. Democratic leaders recognized they had found a powerful spokesperson on military issues whose personal story could counter Republican claims about patriotism and national security. Crockett's phone began ringing with requests from the Democratic National Committee, the House leadership, and progressive organizations looking for an effective voice on defense matters. For Tuberville, the aftermath was less pleasant. His office went into damage control mode, issuing a statement acknowledging Crockett's family's service and attempting to frame his questions as routine oversight rather than personal attacks. But the internet had already preserved his exact words and tone, making it difficult to reframe the exchange as anything other than a spectacular miscalculation. The senator's communications team worked frantically to craft a response that could salvage the situation. They tried multiple approaches, emphasizing his support for military families, highlighting his committee work on defense issues, and attempting to reframe his questions as legitimate oversight responsibilities. None of these efforts gained traction against the viral video that clearly showed his condescending tone and shocked reaction. When you try to embarrass someone based on assumptions and it backfires this spectacularly, there's no good way to spin it, observed one political communications expert. Tuberville's people can issue all the statements they want, but everyone saw what happened. The senator's troubles extended beyond just public relations damage. Within his own party, there were quiet discussions about whether Tuberville had become a liability on military issues. Several Republican colleagues privately expressed frustration that his approach had handed Democrats such a powerful talking point about military families and qualifications, conservative media personalities, who typically supported Tuberville's confrontational style, found themselves in the awkward position of trying to defend the indefensible. Some attempted to argue that family military service doesn't automatically confer policy expertise, but these arguments fell flat against the visual impact of Crockett's documentation and the emotional resonance of her family's sacrifice. The Alabama political establishment began distancing themselves from the controversy. Local Republican leaders, many of whom had military backgrounds themselves, found it difficult to defend Tuberville's approach. Some issued statements supporting military families in general without mentioning the senator by name, a telling political maneuver that signaled their discomfort with his handling of the situation. The senator's approval ratings in Alabama took an immediate hit, particularly among military families who make up a significant portion of his base. Local news stations in Alabama ran stories about the exchange, with many veterans expressing disappointment in their senator's approach. "I voted for Tuberville because I thought he'd respect military families," one retired Army veteran told a local news station. "But going after a woman whose family has served with such distinction, that's not the Alabama way." The story also had broader implications for how political confrontations play out in the social media age. Political scientists noted that Crockett's victory wasn't just about having better facts. It was about understanding that in the modern political landscape, authenticity and preparation matter more than traditional authority structures. Behind the scenes, Tuberville's staff began conducting what they called opposition research reviews, essentially auditing the backgrounds of potential witnesses and opponents to avoid similar surprises in the future. The fact that they hadn't known about Crockett's family military history represented a significant intelligence failure that could have been avoided with basic preparation. The senator himself struggled with the personal impact of the exchange. Colleagues noted that he appeared more subdued in subsequent committee hearings, less likely to launch aggressive questioning without extensive preparation. The confident confrontational style that had served him well in coaching an early political career had been significantly damaged by a single exchange. This exchange perfectly illustrates how the old rules of political dominance don't apply anymore, wrote one political scientist. You can't simply assume that age, gender, or traditional credentials give you automatic authority. Substance matters, and voters can see through empty posturing. The video of the exchange became a case study in political communication classes, used to illustrate how preparation and authenticity can overcome attempts at intimidation. Law schools began using it as an example of effective cross-examination techniques, showing how Crockett had allowed Tuberville to commit fully to his position before revealing the evidence that would destroy it. Perhaps most significantly, the exchange sparked a broader conversation about military families and political representation. Crockett's revelation that she rarely discussed her family's service because service should speak for itself, not be used as a political prop, resonated with many military families who felt politicians often exploited their sacrifices for political gain. She honored her family's service by using it to make a substantive point about qualifications, not just as a political shield, wrote one military spouse blogger. That's the difference between exploitation and recognition. The story also highlighted the changing demographics of American politics, where assumptions about who serves and who sacrifices no longer align with traditional expectations. Military families, like America itself, are increasingly diverse, and politicians who make assumptions based on appearance rather than substance do so at their own risk. As the news cycle moved on to other stories, the Tuberville-Crockett exchange remained as a perfect example of how political confrontations can backfire spectacularly when preparation meets assumption. It became shorthand for the dangers of underestimating opponents based on demographics rather than substance. For Crockett, the moment marked a turning point in her political career. She had proven she could handle hostile questioning not just with grace, but with devastating effectiveness. The quiet preparation and family legacy that she had kept private became public assets that enhanced her credibility on national security issues. Sometimes the most powerful moments in politics happen when someone finally gets the chance to tell their full story, reflected one longtime congressional observer. Jasmine Crockett had been waiting for the right moment to share her family's military legacy, and Tommy Tuberville handed it to her on a silver platter. The exchange would be remembered as one of those rare moments when political theater met genuine substance, and substance won decisively. In an age of manufactured outrage and scripted confrontations, the authenticity of Crockett's response and the genuine shock on Tuberville's face created a moment of real political drama that resonated far beyond the partisan divide. The impact extended deep into American military culture itself. At military bases across the country, service members shared the video in group chats and common areas. The sight of a congresswoman honoring her family's military legacy while simultaneously using it to make a substantive point about qualifications resonated powerfully with active duty personnel who often felt their service was exploited for political theater rather than genuinely understood. "She gets it," wrote one Army sergeant on a military forum. "She didn't wave the flag or talk about supporting our troops in some generic way. She showed receipts and made it clear that she understands military families because she is one." The story also sparked conversations in military families about the often hidden nature of service legacies. Many families, like Crockett's, keep their military histories private, viewing service as a duty rather than a credential to be displayed. The exchange prompted thousands of military families to share their own stories on social media, creating an unexpected moment of national recognition for the sacrifices that often go unnoticed. The ripple effect extended far beyond social media shares and news coverage. Military family support organizations reported unprecedented engagement in the days following the exchange. Spouses of deployed service members reached out to share their own experiences with assumption and dismissal. Veterans who had felt invisible in political discourse found their voices amplified by Crockett's example. One particularly moving response came from a military spouse in Colorado who posted on social media, "My husband has deployed 5 times in 12 years. People see me at PTA meetings and assume I don't understand sacrifice or service." Watching Representative Crockett honor her family while making her point gave me chills. We see you, and now the country sees us too. The exchange also sparked important conversations within military communities about representation and recognition. Many service members noted that military families come in all colors, backgrounds, and political affiliations, but are often stereotyped in political discourse as fitting certain demographic profiles. "Military families aren't monolithic," wrote one Army veteran on a military forum. "We're black, white, Latino, Asian, urban, rural, liberal, conservative." Seeing Representative Crockett represent that diversity while honoring her family's service was powerful. Maybe politicians will stop making assumptions about who serves and who sacrifices. The educational impact of the moment extended into military academies and ROTC programs across the country. Instructors began using the exchange as a case study in leadership communication, highlighting how Crockett had used preparation, patience, and factual evidence to overcome attempted intimidation. "This is what professional military bearing looks like in civilian life," explained one retired colonel who now teaches leadership at a military academy. She remained calm under attack, used facts rather than emotion, and achieved her objective without losing her composure. Those are the qualities we try to instill in future officers. Military historians noted the broader significance of Crockett's family's service record. Having multiple family members receive high-level combat decorations across different conflicts represents an extraordinary level of commitment to military service that spans generations. When you look at the Crockett family's record, a Bronze Star from World War II, a Silver Star from Vietnam, a Purple Heart from Iraq, and a Bronze Star with Valor from Afghanistan, you're looking at a family that has answered the call to service in every major American conflict for the past 80 years, explained one military historian. That's the kind of multi-generational military legacy that most politicians only dream of claiming. The exchange also highlighted changing dynamics in American political discourse. Traditional markers of authority, age, gender, regional background, previous career, proved inadequate when confronted with substantive expertise backed by personal experience. Political scientists began using the exchange as a case study in how assumptions about credibility can be shattered by preparation and authenticity. It served as a reminder that in politics, as in life, it's dangerous to make assumptions about people's backgrounds and qualifications. And sometimes the quiet person in the room with the stack of documents has the most powerful story to tell. The lesson for politicians was clear. Do your homework before you attack, because you never know what credentials your opponent might be carrying. For voters, it was a reminder that expertise and authority come from many different sources, and that the most qualified voices might not always be the loudest ones. In the end, Tommy Tuberville had asked Jasmine Crockett what qualified her to speak on military matters. Her answer, 4 generations of combat veterans, multiple military decorations, and a top-secret security clearance, was more than he had bargained for. And in trying to diminish her authority, he had instead created a platform for her to establish it more powerfully than any campaign speech ever could. The video continues to circulate on social media, shared by military families, political observers, and anyone who enjoys seeing preparation triumph over assumption. It stands as a testament to the power of substance over style, and a reminder that in American politics, you never know who might be carrying the receipts. The long-term cultural impact of the exchange extended far beyond politics into broader conversations about assumptions and expertise in American society. Business schools began using the video as a case study in the dangers of making assumptions about colleagues and competitors based on demographics rather than actual qualifications. The Tuberville-Crockett exchange perfectly illustrates why due diligence matters in any field, explained one business professor who incorporated the video into his leadership curriculum. Whether you're in politics, business, or any other competitive environment, assuming you know someone's background without doing your research can lead to spectacular failures. The exchange also sparked discussions in corporate diversity and inclusion programs about the often invisible qualifications that employees from underrepresented groups bring to their roles. Human resources professionals noted that the video provided a powerful example of why it's dangerous to make assumptions about anyone's background or expertise. Educational institutions found the exchange particularly valuable for teaching critical thinking skills. High school debate coaches used it to illustrate the importance of preparation and the dangers of overconfidence. College communication professors analyzed Crockett's technique as a masterclass in allowing opponents to defeat themselves through overreach. She didn't interrupt, didn't get defensive, didn't try to shout him down, noted one communication professor. She let him commit fully to his position and then methodically dismantled it with facts. That's advanced-level strategic communication. The military community's response evolved beyond initial support into substantive policy discussions. Veterans organizations began pushing for better representation of military families in political discourse, using Crockett's example as evidence that military expertise exists across all demographic groups. Representative, Crockett proved that military families don't fit into neat political categories, wrote the president of one major veterans organization. Politicians need to stop making assumptions about who serves and who sacrifices. Military families are diverse, and their voices deserve to be heard regardless of their background. The exchange also influenced how military families talk about their own service. Many reported feeling more comfortable sharing their stories after seeing Crockett honor her family's legacy while making a substantive political point. Social media groups for military spouses saw increased engagement as members shared their own multi-generational service stories. The political education value of the moment extended internationally, with political science programs in other countries using the exchange to teach about American political dynamics and the role of personal credibility in democratic discourse. The video became part of curricula studying how assumptions about authority and expertise play out in different cultural contexts. Thanks for watching this incredible political moment unfold. If you enjoyed seeing how preparation and authenticity can triumph over empty posturing, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more amazing political stories. The way Representative Crockett transformed what could have been an embarrassing moment into a powerful demonstration of her qualifications shows us all the importance of being prepared and never underestimating others based on assumptions. Which moment from this exchange surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to share this with anyone who needs to see what real political expertise looks like. Remember, in politics as in life, it's not about the loudest voice in the room, it's about who brings the receipts when it matters most.